To some breaking news out of the United States now, when the U.S. military has just released video of the encounter between Russian Su-27 fighter jets and a U.S. drone. There has been a growing war of words between Moscow and Washington over a U.S. drone that crashed in the Black Sea. In a phone call, Russia's defense minister told his U.S. counterpart that drone flights near Crimea were provocative. Earlier, the U.S. said the aircraft was intentionally harassed by a Russian fighter jet, but it wasn't sure if the collision was deliberate. Well, let's get more on this now. We're joined by Samir Puri. He's a visiting lecturer in war studies at King's College London. He's also the author of Russia's Road to War with Ukraine, and he's joining us from Singapore. Always good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. So what do you make of this video?
Well, it's a very dramatic footage. And I think it gives us images that accompany the words that we read yesterday or the day before in the Department of Defense press release explaining what had happened. We see the fuel being dumped by the Sukhoi 27 Russian fighter. We see it, of course, pass extremely close to the US Reaper drone. And then we lose footage, and then the footage comes back. And then we also, I think another important detail is, since yesterday we're discussing this, is actually have more of a sense of where in the Black Sea this went down, southwest of the Crimean Peninsula. So I think we're starting to put the picture together a little bit more clearly as to what happened and where this drone was actually flying when this encounter took place.
OK, so far the video confirms what US officials have been saying, but can it reveal whether the encounter was intentional?
Based on how I've interpreted the footage, I don't think so. And I think if the Russian pilot intended to physically knock out this drone, as in, fly so close that it actually touched his own aircraft, that is an extremely risky maneuver for that pilot, because it's, millimeters or centimeters away from a mid-air collision. So I still think, on balance, this may have been something the Russians were doing to pass very closely, to demonstrate, of course, that they want to show that they have mastery over these skies. The Americans can't fly these intelligence flights undisturbed. But I don't think it's possible necessarily to distinguish whether it was intentional or accidental.
And the Americans, despite condemning what's happened, the language that they've been using around this incident is one of saying that it was incompetence on the part of Russians rather than them trying to do anything like this intentionally.
Yes, that's right. And I think, of course, the Americans are going to be principally concerned as to their future of flying these intelligence gathering missions, these surveillance missions, which, the southwest of the Crimean Peninsula, where we know this drone went down, that's more or less below Odessa, the Ukrainian city that was, threatened. It's not far from where the Moskva Russian warship was sunk back in April. So I think there's a big concern in the US that they'll be able to continue to mount these surveillance operations without this kind of thing happening again. So that's the other big US concern.
And what about concern over the debris? Is anyone looking for it? What happens if it's found? How difficult is it to find debris in the Black Sea?
Right. Well, so as we understand it, again, it's a very deep part of the Black Sea, so the surveillance operation will be extremely complicated. Some sort of critics of Russia have quipped that the Russians struggled 20 years ago to actually get the Kursk submarine, their own submarine, when it went down in a torpedo propulsion accident. How are they going to find it? At the same time, there have been reports of Russian warships coming to where that wreckage is. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, said that they're going to try to recover it. We'll wait and see whether they do recover it. But if they do, that might be quite a benefit to the Russians, and also probably to the Iranians, who they're in a drone partnership with, as we know. Russia buys Iranian drones. Maybe they would supply the technology, a readout of that technology on the American drone to the Iranians in a quid pro quo. That's a possibility if they get it back. Russians,
it's very interesting. Mr. Puri, thank you for your time as always. That is Samir Puri joining us live from Singapore.